All right, so we have Jimmy P. Brown here with us today. And for those who are crazy and don't know, he is the singer, mastermind, songwriter, guitar player, the man behind Deliverance. And in a recent video that I made, we just saw the release with all the glare of Deliverance's Learn LP. It's been remastered for album and CD. So I just thought it'd be a cool time to... because this, like I had mentioned in an email before, this had came out before we all had internet world, and so most
right on the cusp of it.
Yeah, most of what we had was would have been just in print, and so today's new audience probably don't really have an idea what print is as much. So,
Yeah,
of us who did magazines in the day. Anyway, I just thought, because I gave this a listen yesterday for the first time on vinyl, as it says there. First time on vinyl.
yes.
I've joined the vinyl craze, and so I have all of those, and gave it a listen, cranked it up, and it was just, it was like a new experience. It was great. But
Awesome.
thinking about some of the songs, and I thought, well, let's go in and see about getting some background history on this record, and some of the songs, maybe some of the lyrics, maybe some of the mindset behind it. First off, though, we've seen a lot of Deliverance reissues, and you're still making music now. And we've seen, I just grabbed all the stuff that I had, and just recently. So we've got, Greetings of Death. Death. I'm sorry, don't put that up.
Yeah, the Greeting of Death demo. Yeah.
And that's where it started with me. I had that cassette back in the day, and I think that's probably one of the first times I think I reached out and spoke to you many, many moons.
Yes.
It was just, it was great. And then, of course, the first, and most of these have not been on vinyl except for these very first couple. The first,
yeah, just Deliverance and Weapons were the only ones released on vinyl back in the day.
Right.
Yeah.
And now, of course, we keep seeing them reissued. And and then one of the more recent ones, Day of Execution, of course.
Yes.
Now we get to insert Learn in there. It's kind of weird how they're doing these not in the exact order, but River Disturbance.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the two more recent ones, Here With a Say and
Yes.
Newest. So, and of course, I know as a supporter, one of the few who supported the Smithereens reissue, that is hopefully, forthcoming. So,
Oh yeah, everyone is going to hear it as it was intended. That's
right.
I have another concept record I'm working on that's in the works right now. About it ties into everything that's going on right now with the coronavirus and all of this that's going on publicly. What we've been experiencing, it kind of ties into it. But I started writing this concept record years ago, and it's called Guidestones. And I don't know how much you know about the Georgia Guidestones, but it kind of takes from those tenets and goes into this wacky world of conspiracy. So it's going to be very, very cool.
Yeah, look forward to it. So I assume this is more another solo album, not a Deliverance album, right?
Yeah. It's when we got back from Europe, I told the boys, I called them all and just said, I want to concentrate right now more on my solo material. As a matter of fact, I really don't want to record any more Deliverance per se. I'd like us to do live shows, and so if people want to bring us out, do some live gigs, and highlight the 30+ year career of Deliverance, great. But when we did the Subversive kind, it was cool and it was a nice little throwback. But it certainly wasn't where my heart was and what I was wanting to do. Because, at that time I was doing Eraserhead too. I was working on my first solo album. And that's kind of more along the lines of where I was wanting to go. And even then, the Eraserhead album, all those songs were years old. I just had finally put them all together. And, music has been it's been such an on and off thing for me for the last 16 years of my life. And the reason being is because, I once everything ended in 96, the official end of Deliverance back then, I was forced to, go out into the working world and get a job and be a normal bloke and just live life and take care of my family and, and all that other stuff. And so I just dove head first. And every once in a while I'd get, I was pulled back and told, okay, well, let's do Assimilation. And then, so, I got, and we did the Assimilation record, and didn't happen. That's another album that didn't happen the way it was supposed to, but nonetheless, we recorded it and we got it done. And then pulled back again. I went right back into the work world again, and then I did some Fearful Symmetry records. I did a couple of Jupiter 6 records, and then the next Deliverance record was almost 6 years later, which was the As Above So Below album. And that one was a lot of fun, but it was definitely more Mike Phillips pulling me, and I don't want to say forcing me, but definitely convincing me that, oh, let's do a record. And we did some South American dates to support it. And then a few years later, Hear What I Say. And Hear What I Say was truly going to be the last record. It was going to be the last Deliverance album for sure.
Yeah, we keep hearing that.
Yeah. And I really intended it to be so. Then we got this offer to do Mexico, and now I was playing with a whole new group. I was playing with Jim and Victor, and of course George was back when we did Mexico. And then we thought, let's record. And George had his worldview thing going on, but me and Jim and Victor had a good feel with each other at the time, and so we tracked Subversive, and that was cool. But again, it was kind of more a throwback, remember when, this is when it was thrash and heavy and cool, and as diversified as everybody is, Victor is incredibly diversified in his music and his tastes and what he listens to and what he performs, but he's also a hermit and he doesn't perform anymore. So it was a little strange for him to get back in the studio. And then Jim plays in all sorts of cover bands, and then he's always trying to work on a multitude of different projects. He just doesn't want to be typecast as a thrash drummer or a punk drummer. It's kind of hard when that's kind of what you made your career. And trust me, I know, because I fight the same thing, because that's one of the reasons why I like all my synth music I released under the name Fearful Symmetry. I really didn't want my name on it. And because I just knew people weren't going to be as receptive towards it. And same with Jupiter 6, but I finally just got tired of it. And with the encouragement of Michael Sweet, it was just, it was time to go fully solo and just use my name. And that's how Eraserhead happened. And now things going on with my Patreon, and this is what I'm doing for work, and it's not paying much, but it's fun, and it's allowing me to continue to do music, which is what I was put on earth to do,
And that's kind of a good segue, because really, as we speak about Learn, I would say this is probably the first Deliverance album where you really change sound.
Stay was the front runner.
Stay was still kind of heavy in comparison. I think Stay was, when I was making a video yesterday talking about a little bit of the history, to me, Stay was kind of like the Black Album was for Metallica. It was a change that people kind of weren't sure about, but it was still pretty heavy. Whereas Learn was definitely the next step. And of course, and Smithereens were even further with your vocal styles and everything. But Learn, to me, and even when it came out, I didn't care. I wasn't a thrash head that had to have thrash. I wasn't one of those that held you off to that standard. I just loved the solid album that was here and everything about it. So when I revisited it yesterday on vinyl, it was just even that much more powerful. I'm just like, all these songs were there. I already had the history with them, but it was like revisiting an old friend. It was really great.
That's awesome.
But definitely, you can definitely, if you were to put the previous, even Stay and then put this one on, there's a style difference there. I just kind of always felt it was kind of like a turning point that the next couple went on. So, but what I'm mostly interested in is when you approached the album, what was the, what obviously it was a concerted effort to make such an album, but I'm also wondering about some of the lyrics. Now, I haven't sat down and read all of the lyrics, but
Yeah.
you have songs about 1990 and all that stuff. Can you tell us some stories behind what you were thinking at the time?
Sure.
And, was this hey, we're going to change directions, or did it just happen? Things like,
Yeah.
and maybe some of what the lyrics mean to you, maybe that people are not picking up on as easily.
Sure.
Like that.
Well, I think we got to roll back just a tad. Obviously, after the What a Joke debacle,
Yeah.
which I talked about in one of my YouTube videos on my YouTube channel. We were trying to get kicked off Frontline. That's why we did that album. I mean, we tried to make it as horrible as possible, and it was an intentional let's get kicked off Frontline.
But that's like your best album.
Oh, okay.
Oh, what do I say about that? Anyway, okay. Continue.
So we after the dismal sales came back and it returned, because Weapons was so huge and it was so successful that What a Joke had pre-sold a numerous amount of sales, and when the record actually was shipped, within about 3 to 4 months, Frontline just started getting tons of it shipped back to them, and it became the worst selling album, thus far in the history of Deliverance, it was only our third record. And it's no secret, obviously George and I weren't in a good spot with each other. We were fighting a lot, and Deliverance had now become DeliverCon, because 3 of the members, my original members, were now gone, and Chris and Brian, and now it was George and Grotto and Johnny Gonzalez, who were all in Recon. And so that was the running joke. Well, I knew Johnny wasn't going to last. He played a few gigs with us. He did the Weapons video with us. But I knew Johnny wasn't going to last because he wasn't a thrash drummer. And that's when I met Kevin Lee through Jim Chaffin. And so that's how all that happened. So now it was time to find a new guitar player, and we found Phillips. And I had been pitching Terry Taylor to do a solo album, and the label was very against it. But Terry and I had met, and Terry basically said, "Can I listen to your current band?" And I said, "Sure." And so I happened to have a cassette of Weapons, put it on. We listened to it sitting in his Ford Taurus SHO, I'll never forget. And we're sitting there listening to it, and he's like, He's like, "Why not take that thing you do with your solo stuff, where you get the big baritone vocals, and why don't we combine it with this heavy music?" And I go, "Well, it'll never work." And he goes, "Well, we won't know until we try." And it's like, okay, so now that came into play. I had just written Stay of Execution. He asked, "Are you writing for the new Deliverance record?" I said, "Yes." And I showed him Stay of Execution. He was like, "Perfect." He's like, "Let's marry the two together and see what happens." And that's how the route of changing. And so I asked, "Well, what about my solo stuff?" And he was like, "We'll get to that in time." And what it was is the label didn't want to do my solo album. They wanted Deliverance to just be the
Weapons
vehicle.
Part 2.
Well, they didn't necessarily even want Weapons Part 2. I will say that the VP at that time, his name was Mike McLean, was incredibly encouraging of me to follow an artistic path. And he was just like saying, if you don't want to do the thrash metal thing anymore, then change, but do a slight, slow change into where you're going. And that's what Stay was. Stay turned into that. It was an experimental record in a lot of ways, because it was just trying to find what we were doing. And then right in the middle of the recording, we removed Grotto. I temporarily brought Brian Carilla back. Brian did some dates with us. He didn't play anything on the album. What Grotto didn't play, me and Mike Phillips played. And then, so the album was met with great success. In fact, it's the only one that actually charted on Billboard, and did really well. Held its spot there for a number of weeks. And then came time for Learn, and I had only written, I think, 2 or 3 songs at that point. And Terry and I had a habit. What we would do is we would meet on the beach, and I would bring a little radio, and I would show him songs. Then I would show him lyrics, and we would just sit and talk. And that was our way of that was our pre-production, as it were. And Learn, I brought him 1990, a demo of 1990, and I brought him a demo of Time. And he was like, wow, this is kind of more brooding and a little darker. And I said, yeah. And he's like, well, rather than going at it with that big, huge approach of multiple monstrous amount of vocals and everything else like what you did on Stay, why don't we try to just attack this singularly as a band? You got a new band, which I did. I had, at that point, I hired Johnny Maddox and Manny Morales. I'd brought him back to the fold because Manny was our original bass player in 1985. So, and Manny brings a whole other character to my writing because he's so Sabbath influenced. You know, he's got that Geezer Butler thing going, and also has a little Noel Redding, you know, the Jimi Hendrix thing. So he definitely brings a whole new element to the table. And it influenced where I was going because I remember reading a review of Learn, and it said that it was a doom metal record. And I thought, God, it's not doom metal at all. And then if you really listen to it, it's really actually very slow paced. The whole album is incredibly slow paced, with the exception of the song Who Am I? But everything else is pretty slow paced. So it kind of, I could see where they were coming from when they said it was kind of a forerunner to doom metal.
I think anytime you slow down, it gets compared to doom.
I think that's true.
Slow, plodding, you know, heavy.
Yeah.
Doom has a sound, and I don't think it sounds like doom. I can see that too.
Yeah, exactly. When I think doom, I think of bands like Ohm, and you know, just you know, and that's what I think of when I think of doom metal, or even Old Sabbath. You know, this one wasn't Old Sabbath at all. So, but I was really excited about it. You know, I brought cellos and a 4-piece quartet. You know, viola, cello, and violins, and you know, tried to do something different with this one. And Time, I at that point I had read like two books about Charlie Chaplin, and one of his statements that he made was, he said, "My only enemy is time." And so I just became really obsessed with that, and I didn't want to sleep anymore. And my life at that point, the running joke about Jimmy Brown was that my life was one big sleep after the other, because I would literally sleep for 14, 15 hours and just wake up enough to say hi to my kid, my wife, and play video games and maybe go to band practice, you know? And now all of a sudden it went from sleeping like that to like sleeping 2 hours a night. And I was just always writing. I was just working and writing on, you know, writing music. And I was working with other people at that time. I was collaborating with 12th Tribe. I was collaborating with Gospel Gangstas. I started producing for other local bands and trying to help them get label deals. Of course, worked with Savior Machine. You know, things like of that nature. So I was not sleeping a lot, but I was writing, but I had become obsessed with time. So that's where that song kind of came from. And it's just got this kind of very melancholy feel to it. But I love the song. But in other words, I think the summing up of just what I was consumed with, just about the clock ticking and hours slipping away and minutes slipping away from us. It sums up perfectly in that one line right before the solo. It says, you know, our God is not held by time.
Yeah,
nor is he constrained, you know, by its hard bindings.
That stands out to me all the time, is when you start speaking, when you're not singing.
Yeah.
When that is just kind of like, I don't know. I just see that and I'm like, it just really connects. But yeah, I mean,
resonates. Yeah.
it's an interestingly slow song to start off an album for a band that supposedly is, a thrash band, but it's
Yeah.
perfect. It's beautiful. When I stuck it on again yesterday, it was just like, wow. And then when I get to that part, I'm always like, I love that when you say that. So
Yeah, that's my favorite part of the song, because like I said, it's kind of this sad, very thought-provoking kind of thing about how, wow, this sucks, and we're held by time, and I'm getting older, my kid's getting older, I'm starting to get older, and time is really what is just truly our enemy. And then that thought went through my head: God is not held by time, nor is he restrained by these hard bindings. And I love that. And that kind of sums up the whole idea. So in other words, don't get obsessed with the fact that time marches on and we get older, because our God isn't held by it. So, and then we slip right into 1990.
yeah. So what happened in 1990?
1990 was, it's funny. The funniest question I ever got from a fan was, it's time, the lyric says it's time to move on and forget 1990. And he's like, so why did you write a song about it that you have to sing over and over on tour and always be reminded of it? I thought,
True.
there's a lot of irony there. I like that,
Unless you just don't put it in the playlist ever. It's never in the set list.
Yeah, we had to, because man, the opening intro of Manny's bass line is just insane. It's just that it's just so brilliant. Which I have to say, part of what makes Learn so special, it was right when we forged the relationship with Johnny Knox, and we went through 4 drummers before we even started recording, because I just couldn't find anybody that was really, really doing it for me. And then we were suggested this guy from Whiteheart.
Yeah, I was familiar with his work in Whiteheart, because I'm a big Whiteheart fan, and he was.
Oh, that's cool.
I love those years.
We weren't fans of Whiteheart.
Well, obviously, it would make it. Well, it seems kind of an odd mix, but.
But we talked to John. I sent him some working demos, and he said, "Yeah, man, I've never done a metal project before. I'd love to." And so literally we FedExed him a copy of all the songs, and with a click track, and he said, "I'll be there in 5 days." He was out in Nashville, and we're in Cali, and he flew out, and he's like, "Yeah, man, had to pick up a double pedal because I've never played double bass before." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, really?" And I'm like, "I've written double bass parts for this album, so this is going to be strange." But then he jumped on the kit, and immediately me and Manny look at each other and go, "Oh yeah, this is the guy." And it just happened. It worked, and it was just magical. But yeah, that was the beginning of that beautiful relationship with Johnny Knox, and of course, which led into the River album. But that's for another time. So 1990, the song itself is just basically kind of a reflective thought about deliverance, about myself, about me, my walk with Christ at the time, and one of the things the reason I separated Deliverance into categories, I always call it, the first 4 years, and I like to call those the evangelical years, and then I call, once we got signed 1989 to 1992, I call those the industry years. And then from 92 to 96, I call the creative years. And the reason the industry years started in 89, but 1990 is when it really started to roll, because now I was with a different band. The guys who had started it with me weren't really there anymore, even though they were on tour with me. That first tour, Chris left in the middle of the tour, and that's how Jim Chaffin got involved, because Chaffin and I had been friends for 5 years already at that point. And I called him and I said, "Man, we need you to finish the tour." and he
And for
flew
those of
out.
you who may not be familiar with that, Jim is from Crucified. So
Right,
so you
exactly.
stole somebody from Crucified, just so you know, which was another
Yeah,
punk band.
that was just for the tour though. At that time,
Yeah.
I was trying to steal him for Deliverance, but yeah, he wasn't having any of that. Not at that time, but um, it was a real hard time for me because I remember playing a record release party at a club that we used to play all the time out in Hollywood called the Oasis, and it was owned by an organization called the Holy Ghost Repair Factory, and they, it was a coffee shop ministry. It was real small, and but every time we played, we just would pack it out. But there was a lot of ministry happening there. Those people there at the Oasis were real. Loved them to death. They took it seriously, and they knew we were the music draw. But then they would perform the ministry. They would feed the homeless. They would go and talk to them, minister to them one on one, and it was awesome. But we did our record release party, and we had to play 3 shows that night because it was just jam packed. There were people waiting outside to get in. And they sadly told us, I'll never forget, the owner, Connie, just sadly with tears in her eyes told me, you guys can never play here again. And because this violates and goes against, we're not an entertainment field. We are ministry driven, and you guys have crossed over. And it's like,
You're too big for us.
Yeah. And it hurt. It hurt a lot because, we were the band that was getting beer bottles thrown at us because I would stop and preach when we were playing at the Whiskey or playing at the Troubadour or playing at the, all that was now gone, and we had moved into another phase of Deliverance, and we were now being propagated as the Christian Metallica. And if you remember back then, you go to the Christian bookstore, they were actually sent out things by like Frontline and Rex Records and all that other stuff, and they would put Deliverance and then next to it,
Yes.
Sounds Like. You remember those?
I remember those.
And it was a direct response to the fact that the church world at that time was very anti-secular music and really, really training the children not to listen to secular music, which most of them all did. There was that small percentile that didn't. But we were now their alternative. And it was cool. It was a tool. It was something new. It was something not super new because it had already been being done with Daryl Mansfield and Resurrection Band back in the 70s, Daniel Amos and Vector and Common Bond and 77s, and I could just go on and on. But
it still kind of happens today. I see online on Facebook all the time in these Christian music things. Somebody will say, "Can anybody suggest a band that sounds like?" Because these they're fairly new believers, but they want to find something equivalent to what they used to listen to. And
right.
You get a mixed review of people who say, "Just listen to the band you were talking about," or some people that will make suggestions, and I went through that too. I think during my time in the mid to late '80s, I got rid of everything secular and focused just on Christian music. From like 1985, I threw away hundreds of records that I totally regret doing now.
Sure.
Out the yin yang, and it was only Christian music until somewhere in the early 90s where I felt like I was mature enough in my faith and in my following of Christ to bring that back in. So yeah, but people still do it, and you still hear it today, and you still see bands identified as blah 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 sounds like, and then
yes,
because I know there are people out there in the church who may still struggle with that. So yeah, I totally remember that. And
and it was big at that time. And,
because Christian rock was new, they had to, it had to be labeled. The church was really accepting Christian rock to begin with, so
Well, the hilarious part about it, and part of the hypocrisy with it that bothered me as being the Christian Metallica. It's like, well, okay, the reason we're the Christian Metallica is because we listen to
We listen to
Metallica.
Metallica.
And it's like, you guys are propagating this whole, don't listen to Metallica, listen to Deliverance, listen to Vengeance. And yet all of us, every one of us in the SoCal bands and not only SoCal, but all the bands that were, doing Christian music, were all influenced by secular bands. So it's like, it's just seemed really, really strange to me. And I didn't like that. That was part of what was really hitting me once we started going on tour and meeting people. And, first of all, I mean, I'm meeting people, who, and, you show up in Wheeling, West Virginia or whatever, and you're playing a show, and they assume because you're a touring band and you have an album out, you must have a fancy house with a swimming pool and it's like, dude, if you only saw where I live in the ghetto, and my car gets repossessed and broken into, and because I can't pay my bills, and I mean, they just have no clue and no idea. And do I wake them up? Do I tell them the truth and just say, no, as a matter of fact, we live on welfare, I mean, we do the government cheese bit because we can't pay our bills being on a Christian label or being on a label in general, I mean, it's like, it was really, really strange. And, I mean, like, I remember other bands would ask, I mean, how long did it take before you actually started making money? And it took a number of years.
Still waiting.
Well, it did. I mean, I do get to at least say that I was able to live off of my art for a while, and it was nice. It didn't last forever, but and it certainly didn't start out like that. But it was nice. But I certainly didn't make I pretty much made an equivalent to working at Taco Bell full time type of money,
But it was something, which a lot of bands didn't have.
But yeah, exactly. And a lot of bands just didn't even hit that. We were selling, and also I had great management who knew how to get in there and renegotiate stuff, because of obviously the labels were making money off of these sales and whatnot. But that's par for the course. But
yeah,
so 1990, it was just, like I said, overall, it was just this year of decay in a lot of ways. For me personally, I just felt like the band had gone in another direction. It wasn't my band anymore. Something had happened. I had the label tugging me on this side. I had, my new members tugging me on this side, and my old members who had been with me for 5 years were gone. I was having struggles in my new marriage, that I just been married, and, we had a kid early on, and struggling with that. My wife's like, I don't like you going on tour, and then, who's going to watch the baby, and blah, 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 blah. I mean, just all sorts of stuff. So it just led to a real bad downtime for me, in the sense that I was trying to find and rediscover who we were. And so at that point, since the evangelical focus had left, I decided I'm going to write a concept record on spiritual warfare, since that was a hot button at that time, with the books This Present Darkness and Piercing the Darkness from Frank Peretti. And it seemed like no matter where you went in America, every church had a teaching series on these books. So I thought, what a great concept for an album. And so we loosely did a Bible study set to music, and it took off. I mean, Weapons still to this day, like you said, I mean, you held up the cover and said, one of the many reissues. That album just, it's like, I'm not going to lie, I'm going to say it straight out. Every time I talk to Matt, every time I talk to Bill Rocks, every time I talk to Adele over at Frontline, I just, and she, by the way, she doesn't have anything to do with the reissues. She just owns Weapons. And she makes sure that I'm paid for the reissues, which, yeah, hats off. But I always tell them, can you stop flogging this dead horse to death? I mean, how many frickin' reissues can you release of this album.
How many
I mean,
times am I
my
supposed to buy
God.
this album?
Yeah, I mean, oh, it's the yellow version, it's the white version, it's the black version,
I
and
will
this
say
one
I
has
didn't.
a commentary of Johnny, and this one has the extra re-release. I mean, there are so many things you can. I mean, the horse is dead. They just keep flogging it, and it's just like, move on. I mean, it's like my biggest fight, and the thing is, I appreciate where Matt and Bill come from, because I tell them both, and they both say we understand completely. But it seems like when we do want to support you and put out your new music, and we put out, you know, your Movable Walls record by Jupiter 6, or in Matt's case, you know, I'll put out Hear What I Say, and I'll put out this and I'll put out that. I end up sitting on that stuff for a long time because nobody buys it. But then and so we have to put out weapons to make money to subsidize, because people will buy it. And
That's
it's
what I
just
think.
like,
I think it has to do
wow.
with. I think it's demand, and people.
It is.
Buy
It
it.
is.
I mean, and then there's people who are collectors. Unfortunately, I'm one of them. But I have refrained. I didn't buy the yellow reissue. I already paid top dollar for like one of the earlier. But some people want those different ones. But yeah, for the most part, I think it's just because they put little copies out, little presses out, they sell out, and then they have to do it again. So I can kind of in their aspect, it's demand. People want it, but
it is, and I get that part too, bro.
Yeah.
But as the artist who created it, it's
you
like
want to let it go.
Well, it's like, you do know that I'm much more than all of this. That, you know, I'm 50 years old, and I was 20 years old or 21 when I recorded that album. You guys do know I'm a lot more than this, right? I mean, and so from
No,
the
you must
artist
always be
perspective,
Thrash Jimmy. Thrash Jimmy.
yeah,
Thrash.
exactly. And that's
No
what it
more new
feels like.
stuff.
That's what it feels like. So, but yeah, so 1990 was just kind of a, you know, don't repeat that, you know. And as soon as we left the industry years, that's when we went into the creative years, and that's kind of, we were at the heart of the creative years with the Learn album. And so that's what 1990 was. And then Learn, same thing. You know, the good thing I love about those albums and those songs is there was definitely a lot of self-reflecting. Yeah. I'm sorry, I was looking down.
This is where we are. Learn.
Yeah, Learn. Yeah. The thing I love is that there is a lot of self-reflection in those lyrics, just stuff that I was going through. A man's life, a boot camp, preparing him for the grave. Is there nothing more to living, or so I thought I heard them say? You know, it was a man wrestling with his spirituality, and at the same token, wrestling with the fact that, you know, you're living this life, you're in the regular world. You can't build a glass asylum for you to live in and say, oh, I'm only going to go to Christian dentists and Christian car salesmen and Christian doctors and Christian this. I mean, we live in the world, and, you know, we of course have to exude light, but, you know, how does a guy like me, who's naturally pessimistic, and you know, exude light? So I had to really kind of just go about my I mean, you know, like, people don't realize a lot the clause in the early frontline contract. The minute George was in the band, and George was an instant salesman, you know, George came out of sales. In fact, he still, you know, owns his own company. But they wanted him to do all the interviews and not me. And even though it was my band, they found it disastrous every time I did an interview. And it's part of it is because I just said whatever was on my head. I didn't care. I just spoke. I had no filter. And, you know, especially, it seemed like everybody asked the same stupid questions. Oh, what do you think of Believer? Or what do you think of this? Or what do you think of Torn Flesh? And dude, I wasn't going to hold back. I just said what I believe. Well, they're your fellow brothers. And it's like, so what? I don't care if they're fellow brothers. If, you know, if a band sucks, you know. And I just didn't care, and I was never diplomatic, and I didn't really see I only saw the world in black and white, and to be honest with you, I still kind of do see things like that. It's hard for me to find the gray areas. And the label was all about making money, and they were a business, and I respect that. But I was a kid. I had a lot of ideologies that I was following, and I didn't completely understand then. So I was just having to learn. And in my own life,
That's the name of the song.
Yeah. And, in my own life, just everything I was struggling with, dealing with, just as a person, as a believer, as just a responsible human being, as a father, as a husband, and then going off and living this rock and roll thing on the weekends, and then coming home to just being Joe Normal and being the hermit that I was, hiding in the house playing Mario Kart, and that's that. I mean, nobody could get me out to do anything, because I was just a hermit. And lo and behold, 30 years later, I'm still that guy. So, which is hilarious. But that's where it was. It was just a time of learning about myself, and that's when leads right into the next song. Who am I? That was exactly what was going through my head at that time. Number one, reading that scripture, who am I that, who is man that thou art mindful, and that's such a great scripture, because it is, if God being this grand, unfathomable, very finite minds cannot understand the infinite, and the creator of the majesty of all the universes that we can see and we cannot see. And we are this microscopic nothing, basically insects on a planet somewhere, and yet you're mindful. And that's what I love about that scripture, because it actually comes out of the Old Testament. I think Isaiah, and I know David reiterated it and said, who is man that thou art mindful of him? And then, but I love it when Isaiah says, but yet attend to the prayers and supplications of thy people. And that is just phenomenal. And that's kind of where I was in that idea. Again, just struggling to find the balance between being a human, having responsibilities of being a father, a husband, and also just doing my music, doing my art, and being encouraged to do it, but in a very Francis Schaeffer type of way, presenting it. But I knew the ministry days were done; they were over, and that's what those first 4 years represented. And once we got locked into the industry, it changed, because that those first 4 years, our audience was 90% non-Christian, 10% Christian. And then by the time we were signed and everything, it flipped. Now it was 95% Christians and maybe 5% non-Christian. So it didn't make sense to be up there and be preaching the evangelical type of style of ministering or preaching, when all you're doing is preaching to the choir, literally. Right. And so I had to shift focus, and I wanted to let people know, man, I'm human. I'm all the struggles that you come up with me after the concert and share with me. Hey, man, I look at porn, or I look at this, and I struggle with drugs, and I struggle with this, but I love God. And it's like, so, I'm going to clue you in. Same here. Me too.
Life on the planet.
I have the same problems. And you know what? I can't pray for you in the sense that, I'm going to ask that God takes my prowess and give it to you. No, I have to say, let's pray for each other.
In agreement with, yeah.
Yeah, we're human. And that's where that goes, I don't know what's the next song?
Yeah. Actually, I mean, whatever ones jump out as things you might want to talk about. And there's Reflection, In the Will, Renew, The Rain, Desperate Cries.
Is Reflection right after Who Am
I? Renew is.
Oh no, Renew. Oh yeah. Yeah, that was what that one was. I got to tell the funny story on that one. I initially wrote that I was just slapping on Manny's bass. I was doing a slap funk, you know, you know, and I wrote that riff, and but Manny doesn't slap. Manny can't slap, so I had to do it on the album. So I did the whole thing, and then Manny comes in with and plays the rest of the song, you know. But the choruses I had to play. But that was kind of that same idea. Okay, now it's time for me to renew my mind, renew, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ. So it's just time for a renewal. I've got this time issue I dealt with. I've got the past regrets that I'm dealing with. I now have reached a place of I'm learning from my mistakes, or at least trying to. And then I kind of find myself in a spiritual area saying, who am I? And now time to renew the mind. And that's kind of where that is. And I think it really came out really cool, you know.
So it's almost turning into a concept / journey type album where it's
very much.
I don't know if I've ever stopped and looked at it that way. That's cool.
Yeah, I always tried to, when I assemble a record, I always try to assemble the lyrics to do that, to follow some sort of systematic journey of where I was going thought-wise. Yeah. What's the next song?
The Rain.
Oh God, that's probably my all-time favorite song from that album. John Maddox came to me with a riff, and I just fell in love with it, and that whole intro riff, and I just went bonkers over it. And I said, will you allow me to? And he's like, well, I've got some lyrics too. And I read the lyrics, and the lyrics were just, no offense to John, they just weren't that good. So I took some of the ideas and I just reworded them, reworked them, and just changed everything to this just, again, very melancholy, very sad state. And I went back to a place in my head where I had gone to the beach and I was looking out at the ocean in the middle of the night, and, you know, that memories of myself, the slave, you know, realize the one who brought the pain. I've only myself to blame, I think the lyric says, you know. It was then I cried. And that's, you know, you have this whole thing of, just because you self-reflect, you know, it doesn't mean that it ever ends. And maybe with me, that's part of my problem, is that I tend to go back and I love to beat myself up constantly. And, you know, sometimes you just gotta, you know, what's done is done, move on. And I've always had a problem ever since I was a kid with that. You know, it's like, I'll just keep beating myself up for something I did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 6 years ago, or whatever. And consequently, that'll bleed over and you start beating other people up for something they did 5, 10 years ago. You know, it's just, it's a very unhealthy way of living. And that's what was kind of going through my head with The Rain, you know. The life I lived, the toll it took, but the night you found me in the rain, because it was almost like I rediscovered salvation that night I was on the beach. And that's a very special song. And it was the first time that I really used my real voice. I said, I'm not going to try to sound like Jeff Tate or Bruce Dickinson or Bowie or Terry Taylor or whatever, because, you know, as a singer, you try to identify with all your influences. And, you know, that was the first time that I said, I don't want to, I'm going to be me. And I went in there and I just did it, and it happened. And it was really, really cool. Very, very nice song. Reflection follows that one. And Reflection was actually a piece written by Mike Phillips. And he had given it to me prior to him leaving Deliverance. I remember we sat and worked on it, and I just thought it was beautiful. You know, it was very Rush. You know, that it sounds just like something off of Hemispheres, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. And then I loved the lyrics. You know, time is a reflection of past misery, so clear. And then I added my own lyrics to it, and it just seemed appropriate to go into from that to In the Will. And In the Will, I'd just been reading about that whole sacrifice, and you know that story still perplexes me. I know there's we can say it's a typology of Christ, and it's this and it's that, and more about, you know, are you willing to give up anything and everything, including the life of your own son, to fulfill being in the will? And it was just kind of that idea. And I liked doing all the Egyptian or Middle Eastern style guitar chording, and you know, thought it was really, really cool, and we had a lot of fun doing it. Wasn't a song to play live, and I never wanted and meant for that song to be played live. It was just more part of again, the mental journey of, you know, you have the rain, so rediscovery of salvation, and then reflection, just kind of remembering this sad time in your life. But now you got to find yourself in the will, in the great will that is beyond you. And then we go into Desperate Cries. Desperate Cries was very cool. It was probably the most progressive song I had written at that time, with without being speed metal. Everybody knew I was very technical in my rhythm style, and you know, but this one I used my right hand or my left hand technical stuff, you know, with different chord structures and changes. And it's almost a nod back to evangelical, you know, it's a nod back to, you know, see the cars passing by, countless people walking the street, desperately hurrying where they must go, living a life, living a life, believing a lie, refusing to see what must be shown, they're dying. And isn't that much like today? You know, that's just people, the hustle and bustle, but no one really sees what's going on. It's a cool song. I like that song. But can you hear them crying with Desperate Cries? And I love that song. And it's worth noting, I accidentally, when I wrote the song on a drum machine, back then the drum machines were very super mechanical. They didn't let you write the way you wanted to. And I wanted the hi-hat to play a certain way, and ended up playing off on this weird time signature that didn't make sense with the kick and snare pattern. And I told Knox, oh, you don't have to worry about that. And he's like, well, I already learned to play it like that. And I'm like, that's impossible to play. I mean, he's like, no, you can play it. He goes, it's just difficult. It's weird, but it's not impossible. And he goes, and it doesn't make sense. But it's during the chorus that it's like the snare kick hi-hat thing. For those that love that kind of odd technical stuff, it's during the chorus where he does that weird thing. It's super cool, but it was all wrought from a mistake on my faulty drum programming.
And now we know, see?
Yeah. And then, you know, then go ahead.
I was just saying, I've had that kind of experience as a drummer. I came in and there was a song that was written by somebody else with the drum machine, and they sent it, and I learned it that way. Then we got in the studio, and the same guy who wrote the song with the drum machine said, well, can you do something other than what was on the demo? I'm like, I learned it. I'm like, I learned to play it that. And it's like, how can you tell me on the spot to do my own thing when I've already done your thing? So,
oh, that's funny.
Shouldn't have thought of that way.
Okay, so it happens, you know,
yeah.
Especially, you know, because with the insurgence of using drum machines to do demos and stuff, like you know, back then, I mean, that's what, you know, I was doing. I was using a lot of drum machines, and went through the Elises and the Boss and everything else. You know, I was convinced at one point, you know, one day I'm going to be able to just record a whole album with this, you know. And then, you know, bands like Ministry and Sisters of Mercy, you know, they were already doing it, you know. But I was talking about like a metal record, and
Yeah.
lo and behold, it's happening every single day, But then we come to the close, man. To me, the piece de resistance of the album, which is Sanctuary, which has become the closer for every Deliverance concert. One of my earpieces, the other one's dying, so I'm switching over to this one. But yeah, that song is probably the most special. The reason I love it so much is because it. I remember hearing it the first time when it came out. I was driving down the Santa Ana freeway with my sister. I was in the passenger seat, and we were listening to the local Christian radio station, KVRT, and they said, and we have a new one here from local boys, Daniel Amos. This one is called Sanctuary, and I heard it, and I was like, oh my God. I just remember just being floored and blown away, and it was like Bowie but with Terry's voice, but the music was so beautiful, and I just remember just crying, and I always emotionally responded to music, and certain songs especially that just really moved me, chord structures and everything else. And by the way, I'm pouring myself some coffee. If you were wondering what I'm doing, so there it is. Yeah, as you can see, I love coffee.
From the cribs of the famous, rich and famous.
Yeah, different types, as you can see. I am a coffee snob. So it's something me and Jim Chapman have in common. And whenever we discover a new bean, or a new, oh, this country has this bean, and we call each other, and then we try to one up each other on oh, well, do you have this coffee grinder, or do you have this kind of machine, and do you have this, and do you have that? But so we go in to do Sanctuary, and at this point I hadn't recorded anything. I just told Terry, I'm gonna do this cover of your song, and he really fought me. He didn't want it done, and because he said, you already did Horrendous Disc on Stay of Execution.
Right.
Now it's gonna look like I'm pushing you to like record my songs.
He's making
and yeah, and I'm like, no, I mean, you guys, you just didn't realize what a huge honor it is for me to be working with you. I mean, Terry for me was like getting to work with Brian Eno or David Bowie or Peter Gabriel, and so all I did is, since Manny had no idea how the song went, and I didn't know how I was going to have the guitar go, I just put a click track down and told Knox, just play a beat. Boom, ba-da, boom, boom, da, boom, ba-da, boom, boom, da. And I had the mic in my head, and I go, okay, vocals will start here. Boom, 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 boom. And I'm like, okay, now we're getting ready to go into the chorus. Da, 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 boom, ba-da, boom, ba-da, boom, ba-da, boom. And I go, okay, now, and I'm like, now stay with that rhythm for 8 bars. And he's there. Okay, we're getting ready. 1, 2, going into the next verse. Da, 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 that's exactly how it was tracked.
Wow.
And go and listen to it, and you could hear it. John doesn't hardly do any riffs or anything. And the one time he veers is during the bridge. I told him, go to the ride. Dun, 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 dun. And I go, okay, now do something interesting right here, because I want to break. And then that's when he did the Tom thing. And it was just, dude, it was pure magic the way it just happened, because it was just him playing to a that's it. No music.
And your direction.
And me telling him what to do, telling him what would be there. And there's no music, there's no guitars, there's no bass. Nobody has a clue what this is going to sound like. Terry's really nervous. And I finally just looked at him and I said, dude, no offense, but I'm producing this song. You're not really going to have anything to do with this.
Yeah.
And so when time came to actually put the guitars and the bass and everything else down, it was, I really didn't have it in my head. It just kind of happened. And then when we were doing vocals, I just said, it was the end of the day. My voice was scratchy. I was tired. And I said, let me go in and lay a scratch and just see what it's like. And then we'll attack it tomorrow when we come in. Terry and Gene were like, yeah, no problem. I went in there and I did it. And I was doing those, that was simply a warm up. It wasn't intended to be in the song. It was just me warming up my voice. And I did the song in one take. I came in I came into the control room and Terry and Gene were just sitting there and they're like, Jimmy, I think this is the take. I'm like, oh no.
No way.
And they're like, no, listen to it. And it just was it. And so they said, you can go back and go double the, sanctuary, go and double that, but we're leaving this track. And it's like, okay, that's cool with me. And it felt right. And, but the greatest honor in the world was when, Terry invited, it was during the mixdown, and Terry invited all of DA, Greg Flesh, Tim Chandler, Jerry Chamberlain, Ed McTaggart. They're all there. And he invited them just to listen to my version of Sanctuary. And I was like nervous. I was scared. I'm kind of like hiding in the corner. And Terry was just so proud of it. And right when it starts, boom, Ed McTaggart, the drummer, turns around and goes, it's too slow. Well, it is compared to the original, but Terry just looks at him and goes, listen. And so they sat there and all of them are just staring at the speakers and listening. And I'm with my head down the whole time because I don't want to look. I don't want to see people's faces. Yeah, I don't want to. And then the end comes, and then Gene's doing the fade, manually. And I look up, dude, there wasn't a dry eye in the studio.
Wow.
Everybody was, they just looked at me and they started clapping and they were like, bravo, Jimmy, that's unbelievable. And I look over at Terry and he just gives me a smile. That's all. He just gives me a smile. And I was like, man, if ever a pupil with his mentor, moment, that was it for me. And I just really, really felt so good about it. But that's why, and it closes every Deliverance show as it should, because it's had this very, what I like to call mystical, magical effect on every audience. Because, since I play with so many different band members, as you well know, every time we get together and we play live, and I always say, well, Sanctuary is going to close. And they're like, really? Dude, a lot of people don't like the song. Like Chaffin doesn't like it, or didn't like it rather. Glenn, same way. George, when we went to Mexico, it's like, dude, that's a boring song to close with. And I'm like, you'll see, you'll know, because something happens every single time we play that song. This feeling comes over the audience, and it's like just angels supernaturally just come and surround the place, and a big hover tent happens. I don't know any other way to describe it. It's just a supernatural reaction every single time we play it. And it's beautiful because you see people just crying, and it's just unbelievable. And everybody sings everybody's singing that along with you. And it's just a very emotional moment every time we play that song live. And for me, it's like not only the perfect closer for Learn, but anytime Deliverance plays live, it has to close with Sanctuary because it's just the perfect moment. it was caught in time, you know. It was just perfect.
Yeah. And the thing to remember, as you say, not everybody, and I would admit to this, I was not familiar with DA back in the days. I don't think I just started listening to them until probably in the past 10 years, but that was not your song. So you were bringing something to a new audience, thinking this was a new Deliverance song. Nobody reads a liner note to see you didn't write that. Come on, this was a new Deliverance song. So yeah, you're and I think to a degree, her and this disc even, because I knew the album name. I knew that was a very popular album by Daniel Amos. Never had it, never owned it. It was one of those bands, you know, I used to listen to a lot of Larry Norman, but never crossed over into the DA world, even though I know there's a connection. So when I heard yours, I knew that was produced by him. I knew it was one of their songs. Had no clue Sanctuary was one of their songs. Because by this album, it was like, I didn't even realize he was that involved. So yeah, you brought it to a whole new audience and, of course, made it your own. And it is. It's a fantastic closer. So, yeah. And that's a great story. That's the kind of stuff that I'm really appreciative of, you know, being able to talk to you about. Because, you know, here we are 20 years later. I didn't know any of that stuff. And I did notice as we were talking, I grabbed the CD. And I know they do this occasionally. Maybe you're not aware of it. But on the vinyl release, the songs are in different order. I don't know if it's going to mess up your – they have so Who I Am and Renew were moved from here to down here. And these two, a lot of times they'll do that
for time purposes.
For time purposes. So as you were telling the story, I'm like, man, Jimmy's confused. But then I saw the, and then you look at the CD, and they are in the right order. They're in the right order here, and they are on the right order on the new remastered CD. So it's a vinyl thing. I know people have to suffer with because now we're not going to know the story in the right order. But you know,
that sucks. But vinyl is a different experience, you know. But yeah, it kind of makes sense that, you know, for a time purpose, you know, because Renew and what did they swapped Renew and Who Am I or
Who Am I and Renew start the second side, and they bumped up Reflection and In the Will to the end of.
Oh, that's a bummer because The Rain is supposed to open up side B. What a shame. If I'd known that, I would have made a big scene. That's probably why they didn't tell me. Well, again, you have it. I don't.
I don't have
any of these reissues. You know, Matt eventually sends them to me, but and then Manny, stupidly enough, buys them. I told him, I don't know why you buy them. I mean, Matt should give you a copy.
Yeah.
But I always ask for two. I always ask for one for a collect to keep alone, and then one to put in a frame. You know, it's weird, dude. I don't own a CD player. I don't own a record player. I don't even own a traditional stereo. I haven't for years. I just have you know, my sound bars and my home pods, and that's it. I mean, and so I play everything off my phone.
And I still have the majority of my collection. I mean, I have, it is hard to see, but I mean, I've got thousands of.
Oh, I could see it. I could see it.
And it goes all the way across the room. I've got, I don't know, thousands of CDs. Of course, in years of doing a magazine and stuff, you get a lot of stuff, promotional stuff, you accumulate it. But I have thousands of CDs. So then I get this smart idea a couple years ago. I want to get back into vinyl. You know, my wife is like shaking her head. No. So, and now we're hundreds of vinyl pieces later. So, and that's kind of what, you know, I was doing these videos is basically join the vinyl revolution of people who are on YouTube who talk about records. And so
sure,
it's growing and people do it. So I love the fact that they're reissuing this. I know that it's still not, you know, they put out these limited run couple hundred copies because it's not a big market. It's not like the Christian music's going to sell thousands of copies. So, but it's great. And it is a new experience. It's kind of a return because, you know, we went through this back in the 80s and stuff. So
yeah.
And I don't have an audiophile system, but I have one that's decent enough to where, you know, I can notice a little difference, and it's just a new experience. It's kind of a fun return to taking something out, putting it on, dropping the needle, listening to songs, and not just clicking the button and going about your work and the music's playing in the background with an MP3. You're engaged, and it's I don't know.
Oh, I used to love that experience, man. I used to love, growing up, I mean, I since I was 4 or 5 years old, just, you sit and stare at the vinyl while it's playing and you listen, and it's such a cool experience. And it's sad that that's kind of missed now. Maybe I'm hoping people are getting to do that again, with the reissue of vinyl, is to get to experience that awesome moment of unwrapping the cellophane and just like, yeah, getting to
The
listen
big
to
art, the
this.
big pictures, all of that. It's the
Yeah.
bigness of it. No more little images of stuff. And
Oh yeah, where you get the magnifying glass to try to read the lyrics or the liner notes,
yeah, serious for sure. But yeah, so it's great. Well, this has been really good. I'm glad, because again, I don't think I knew a whole lot about this, all the background on this album. So I'm hoping
Yeah.
that other people who watch this would learn the same, and I hope that this album sells out just like that. But
I hope so too. I hope so too, because it was a great record. It's not my favorite. Everybody obviously knows River Disturbance will always be my all-time favorite for many reasons. But maybe we'll do an episode on that.
yeah, that'd be cool, because it's on vinyl too. So
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
and okay, well, I am going to end it there.
All right, man.
I mean,
All
unless you have
right.
anything else to add, I'll
Oh no. The Sanctuary was definitely the closer. I mean, that's because that was such an important part of that record for me. If anything, for Learn, the saving grace of it is our cover of Sanctuary.
yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna ask you to hold for a second. I'm gonna pause the recording and then I'll say
Sure.
goodbye. But so anyway, for those of you watching, hope you've enjoyed this and gotten as much out of it as I have. This has been a great recollection of all these nice stories and stuff behind this reissued album, Learn. And if you haven't got it, go get it. It is on Retroactive Records. You can get it Boone's, Overstock, places like that. I'll have links in there. So anyway, thanks
Awesome.
for joining with us, and we will definitely think about doing this again. And thanks for
Oh yeah, man.
us.
Sounds cool, bro.
Later.